Hi, everybody. Today I have on my Brave Believers t-shirt. This is from another vacation Bible school that I wrote. This shirt's from 2002 when I was at St. John's in Hagerstown. You'll see that there's a little blimp on it, and the Bible verse that trails behind it is Hebrews 12, verses 1 and 2. And those verses say, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God." Well, I was thinking about some brave believers today, and I think in these days we're falling into that category. But I was thinking of the Apostle Paul, and we can read about him in the book of Acts. His story starts a little ahead of chapter 9. He actually is the coat holder at Stephen's stoning. So whenever Stephen had been going out telling people about Jesus, didn't appreciate that, they had him stoned to death. He's the first Christian martyr. And it says that Saul was there holding people's coats. But we really get into Saul's story in chapter 9. In that story, we see that Paul has written some letters and has asked the chief priest if he can take those letters to Damascus, where he's going to have Christians or people who believe in Jesus arrested and brought back to Jerusalem. Well, on the way, on the road, suddenly he sees a bright light. He's struck to the ground by this light, and a voice comes out saying, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And it was Jesus speaking to him. Now the other people with him saw the light, but they didn't hear this voice. But Paul becomes blind from this. So he stumbles into Damascus with all of his friends, and there he stays blind. He can't eat, he can't do anything. Now, one of my favorite Bible names comes up then. The man's name is Ananias. And Ananias has heard about Saul, and he knows his intentions to get rid of all the people who believe in Jesus as the Messiah. But God comes to Ananias and tells him to go and meet with Saul and to tell him about Jesus. Now, think about that. If you were asked to go meet somebody who you pretty much knew was going to kill you whenever they saw you, would you want to go visit with him? Well, Ananias thinks about this for a little while, and he does go and meets with Saul. And while he's meeting with him, he, of course, tells him about Jesus. Saul gets up and he takes food again, and he becomes a believer in Jesus. Now, a little bit later in the story, and this is from our confirmation book, this is what happens whenever Saul then goes and meets with some of the disciples to tell them that he wants to join with them. It says, after finally arriving in Damascus and having his sight restored, Saul hung out with other Christ followers and started preaching and teaching. As you can imagine, people were skeptical of his intentions. This was a guy who had been their enemy only a few weeks earlier. But before long, it wasn't the Christian followers that Saul had to worry about. Some of the Jewish leaders were not happy with his saying Jesus was the Messiah, and they decided to kill him. So when maybe have you had to make a choice that left you unpopular or even disliked by people that you care about? So tell about some of that experience if you can think of one. I'm thinking of one today. Today with the coronavirus, we have kind of come up with two sides to it. We have the people who want all of the stay-at-home orders and everything lifted, and those who want them to stay in place. I think for us as Christians, it comes down to what is the best thing to preserve life. So I want you to think about that and see which side you would fall on. And in our email today, I'd like you to write some of those responses to me. So thanks for listening, and I'll come back tomorrow.